We have returned, not with Lore Week, but with Streaminations. Shadowplay, that's the name of this. Part 1, Season 7, Episode 25, Shadowplay, Part 1. This is the episode in which we have to bring back the Pillars and Starswell the Bearded, and just like this giant avalanche of continuity falls over us as we're going through it. I don't even know. I do not know how to rate the continuity of this episode. We are absolutely giving this episode an arc counter, because duh. But I'm not sure how many actual continuity counters we'll end up giving this one, so we'll see. Yeah, there's so much continuity, at a certain point it's hard to even process it all. Let's start at the beginning. First we have strength, bravery, healing, beauty, hope, and sorcery. Huh. We also have the pillars were gathered by another. I don't know who that other pony is. You notice they don't even name him here, by the way. But they were brought together by another pony, but that pony became the Pony of Shadows. Alright, I'm going to talk more about the Pony of Shadows and his other form in the next episode, but all I want to comment on here, just to get that out there in case I forget to mention it, I have had a fan theory for a while that the external force that influenced the Pony of Shadows and Nightmare Moon is the same force. Maybe not literally, but at the very least figuratively, thematically, the same concept. To use the Star Wars equivalent, the dark side of the force, right? I mean, it may not literally be the exact a sentient, sapient entity that's like, I shall corrupt you. But, you know, both of them underwent Luna. Yeah, exactly, the counterbalance to Harmony. Luna and someone who shall be named later, I'll just call it Stygian. Both Luna and Stygian had the same general problem. The same type of emotional reaction. The same disharmony with people they should be harmonious with. And as a direct consequence, they were directly corrupted by something that mutates and alters them in a shadowy way, which is both visually similar and thematically similar, as well as warping their minds in pretty much the exact same manner. Now, Luna's was a smaller case scenario of this, whereas the Pony of Shadows is mentioned to be an extremely higher tier villain. But the same general concept applies, and I do think that was deliberate, but we'll talk, again, more about that next time. Yeah, the other pattern. I mean, you know? Anywho, we'll talk more about that next episode, because it doesn't really come up in this episode. No, this episode is an entire season smashed into one. But I'll get to that in a moment. I'm pretty sure Neverwinter Nights 2 predates this by quite a bit. So, Starswell the Bearded. Holy crap. Starswirl goes all the way back to Season 1 as a random throwaway line as a really old pony, which Luna recognized. Remember that? Way back in the first Halloween episode? And he's real, and he's right here. And this is the first time we've heard him or actually seen him in the entire show. He's been referenced quite a few times, but it's entirely been like a, you know, once upon a time kind of a thing. And, well, here he is. I also like how, so this is why I mentioned the continuity thing. The fact that he's this old pony that has established a lot of their magic, who taught Celestia and Luna, who is connected to the Pony of Shadows, which Rainbow remembers from Castlevania. Like, we're already up to 5 continuity counters in the first scene. You see why I have trouble counting the continuity of this episode. Can I just say that the animation of this episode, I know, I won't shut up about the animation, but the animation is so good! One of the things that animation has had the hardest time figuring out, each time there's... Let me walk that back a bit. So the earliest animations had trouble trying to make something look normal. They looked kind of awkward and stiff, and I'll explain why in a moment. But then they figured out ways to trick people into thinking that that's smooth animation, and they got better and better at it until we got to more modern animation. Then they switched over to the CGI stuff. This was actually in the 80s, believe it or not. But from the 80s up until, let's be honest, Pixar, the CGI stuff had the same problem. Everything was stiff and awkward and just seemed animated kind of strangely. And nowadays, you look at Toy Story 4, and that is smooth as butter, right? Same arc. This is also true for other different types of animation. Flash animation, like this show is made out of, or I forget what it's called. It's the not CGI animation. It's 2D cell stuff that's animated by computer, but it is still a 2D thing. It's not a full 3D render. I can't remember what that's called off the top of my head. Each style of animation has had this same path of learning how to make it look better and better. And the biggest thing by far is figuring out lack of static imagery. Now, the human mind is more attracted to something visually that isn't static, and if it was static, the mind would notice it's off. I'm going to just demonstrate this. I've actually demonstrated this a few times on my show. It's the reason why when I was using the green screen for the longest time, I would have videos playing in the background, looping videos, which would play an animation, because if I had just a picture, it looks wrong. And the mind notices that that's a picture, and it just looks a little bit off. And you may or may not have already noticed, because I'm covering most of it, but I actually paused the video back here. And you can tell immediately and without hesitation that this is a picture now, that this is just a static image. You know, the clouds aren't even budging, the camera isn't moving at all, the sky isn't moving, etc., right? Those little subtle movements are the kind of things the human mind is rather attached to. The moment I hit play, it looks more natural. The moment I hit play, your eye is picking up on this, whether you're actually noticing it or not. Now, when it comes to animation, the biggest thing for that is the subtle stuff. Now, I move around a lot, but have you noticed over the past several minutes I've been discussing this, how much my head has been moving, for example? Like, follow the path of just one thing, like my chin, for example. Older animation, this all takes work and effort. Getting these points to all move in a natural and smooth thing is much more work than it sounds like. What would happen then is in older animation, when people are first figuring out a specific animation style, is the head wouldn't move. It would just stay exactly in this one exact spot. And even if they get the lips to move, it looks kind of odd. And this is, we've seen this, right? You've seen Hanna-Barbera cartoons, right? You've seen the old Tom and Jerry stuff. You've seen this kind of thing where there's basically a static image with an animated mouth on top of it, right? Or yeah, Johnny Quest is another perfect example of the type of animation I'm talking about. And so over time, they get better and better at animating each of the individual parts until it becomes this one fluid, smooth motion. And I bring all of this up because in this episode, just in the first scene, I know, of course, you can't just go rewatch it really quick. But if you were to rewatch it really quick, there are so many little subtle movements of the head and the eyes. Like, there's a scene, I can picture it right now, where Starlight, the camera's like right here, and Starlight's right here, and Luna and Celestia are over here. And she looks down, and then you actually see her head look up, tilt, and then tilt a little bit more as she's talking. Very naturally and very smoothly, as if it was real, basically, as if it was properly animated. And that sounds so minor, but trust me when I say that is a huge amount of effort and work to get that to look that natural. Another example, same scene, is when the camera zooms out and, you know, they're talking about, oh my gosh, we'll never be able to figure out this ancient thing. And AJ says, no problem, you've got all sorts of help. All of the ponies standing in that background are moving. None of them are just static images. Fluttershy just kind of tilts her head a little bit like she's curious about the whole thing. Pinky is kind of doing a little bit of a bop. Rainbow is just kind of hanging out, but she's also smiling a little bit, and she'll shift around periodically. She's doing, there's movement. And it's all very fluid. It looks like a bunch of people standing there instead of a bunch of cardboard cutouts standing there. And the eye notices that, whether you notice it or not. And I don't mean to sound derogatory. I don't mean to sound accusatory. My point is, most of this kind of visual subtlety, you shouldn't notice. That's the point. That old adage of good audio design and good visual design is the stuff you never notice is very true. Because an enormous amount of effort is put into making something look so good, you don't notice how good it is. Because we'll notice when it's bad. Sense make? And I just wanted to go off that little speech because this episode nails that so well. And I think this is yet another example of the animation continuing to get better as this show goes on. Okay, speech off. Speech over. What's my next note? Research. Oh, we're still on the first scene. So we've got to have the research and the rereading and the rereading. What? Yeah. This then leads to an interesting example of how ironically well-paced this episode is, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So he says, let's follow the emotional tone of the episode. Starts off grave, straight out of a Lord of the Rings kind of a thing, right? That's you know what I mean? That sort of serious tint to it. I don't know how else to describe that. Some fiction just has a seriousness to it. It's not dark, it's not edgy, but it's like it's something that you are supposed to take in a serious manner. I don't have a better word for that, so I'm just going to keep repeating that word until it loses all meaning. Serious, serious, serious. Sirius Black. Contrast the first Harry Potter movie to the third, to use an example of what I'm talking about. There's X-Human Revolution. Thank you very much, Edward Fedor. Very much appreciate that sub, as always. The Council of Elrond effect. I like that. Because you see that, and it's a bunch of dwarfs and some elves and some guys in armor and a dude with a staff and a bunch of midgets, right? Like, how is you supposed to... But it's a very serious, somber scene, right? It's actually arguably one of the better scenes in the first film, because it's extremely well constructed, and you can feel that undercurrent of, I've got a better word for it, instead of seriousness. It's got weight to it, right? There's a believability, there's a weight grounding it. This is why Star Wars took off, my opinion. Because there'd been plenty of, fantastical sci-fi back in the day, right? But Star Wars had a weight to it. A New Hope, the first one. There was just a believability and a seriousness, and I do firmly think that Peter Cushing and Alec Guinness are two of the very big reasons why that weight is there to that film. I was going to give another example, and I can't remember it right now. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean. So the episode starts and manages to pull a bit of actual weight into it, which is an impressive feat in its own right. Then it immediately builds into the hopeful moment, which is actually pretty much patterned straight off of the Fellowship of the Ring scene I just referenced. It's very serious, very somber, very weighty, and then it's like, okay, we can do something about this. You'll notice almost every pony has at least one line and is part of the conversation in some way or another, by the way. It's a nice little touch. Then we cut to the next scene, and there's a candle which is burnt down to its stub. And they're just looking at it like, ugh. And it's obvious they're having no results, no reaction. Then Spike picks up the candle and throws it into a bin entirely full of spent candles. This is all wonderful visual storytelling and visual shorthand for it's been a while. They've been at this for a while, right? And these kind of little visual tips are the kind of things that I love, especially since they then, as is MLP standard, they show then tell. They then say it's been 3 days that they've been working on this, right? Excuse me. Pretty much nonstop. So you see the pacing and the tone, how it starts here and then builds up and then it smashes back down, but not to a depressing or a dark state, just to kind of a deflated state. Like we're not getting anywhere. Then, have you ever seen a doctor's handwriting in real life? Because I have a lot. It's always kind of bothered me a little bit how much doctors will just scribble out scripts, because that's medicine and people have reactions to the wrong medicine, so you kind of want to make sure they get the right medicine. Now nowadays most of that stuff is backtracked via computers. You get the physical thing and you get the physical script, but that doctor also put that into a computer. So what the pharmacist will do is they'll look at that script and say, okay, this is legit, and then they'll look up the actual script in the computer. And that's what they'll actually give them. But there is a period of history where they would look at that script and try to decipher it in order to figure out what it is they're supposed to give you. My mother was a pharmacist during that period in history, and she spent a lot of time trying to decipher doctors' handwriting. Anyway, Star Swirl apparently has really terrible handwriting. Almost as terrible as Sean. Sean has just the worst handwriting. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I haven't, because, I haven't been stalking him for the last 10 years. I've been watching his every moment. Sorry. I'm not familiar with that, Sean. So, let's put a pin in that. Let's put a pin in that. But thank you regardless for the donation. As always. And I'll look into that in a minute. Yeah, horn writing, or mouth writing, or wing writing. That does make sense. That's the three things they do. My handwriting is actually decent. It's not great, and I use a lot of shorthand. But people can usually read my shorthanding. Which is okay, because the cliche is that smart people have terrible handwriting, so I can prove I'm not smart. So, quick transitions to keep the pace moving. And we're at the ruins. Oh, sorry, I skipped over a step. I apologize. Starlight apparently can read Old Ponish. Well, that's actually not true. She can't read Old Ponish. She can read terrible handwriting, is what she can read. Apparently she has terrible... Excuse me, she apparently has terrible horn writing too, so that makes sense. Yeah, she can sound out... Like I said, I had to clarify. She can read terrible handwriting, is what she can read. That's her gift. And actually, I'm okay with that. I don't think it was necessary, but it is an amusing little anecdote. It's also, the reason I'm willing to forgive this is because it's our first step in really establishing the connection between Starlight and Star Swirl. These two episodes, in many ways, directly connect and oppose the character of Starlight and the character of Star Swirl. There are several ways this is established in the first episode that's really going to come up in the second one, so I'm going to leave that topic for the second part, for the most part. But yeah, Sunburst is the one who can actually read Old Ponish. She can just sound it out. And Twilight can, too, a little bit. So they figure it out, they go to the area, and they're like, aha! And they put down the thing. And we see for the first time... Star Swirl. I absolutely understand why someone like Star Swirl is the level of celebrity he is. And, yeah, Pwnhenge, by the way, haha. I was thinking about it. I've brought this up in several fictions that we've covered. Real life doesn't really have celebrities like fiction tends to have. You know, we don't have one person who established the principles of magic in real life, right? Like, we don't have people like that in real life. We have celebrities, you know, we have people who are large-scale sea changers for history, but we don't have anyone on the scale or scope that fiction tends to have. And so I've always found it a little bit hard to understand, and I've always had to do a little bit of a mental loop to try and comprehend the severity of how much these people have impacted their societies. Most settings with magic have something like this. You know, Mordenkainen over in Forgotten Realms, or, of course, now I can't think of anyone. I suppose Dumbledore would qualify, but even Dumbledore isn't quite to the level I'm talking about. Yeah, like Merlin is actually a pretty good example of here. Someone who is just incredibly significant and relevant for the development and advancement of an entire cornerstone of an entire culture, right? It could, by the way, before we get into a historical argument, it could be argued there are such people who have had that kind of influence in real life, but we don't look at it that way, culturally. We don't venerate them the way that fiction tends to. Whether that's a good or bad thing is up to you. It's just something worth commenting on. So Star Swirl is, of course, this type of character. Someone who has fundamentally had a significant and massive impact on the entire freaking setting, right? This one person, in addition to having invented a huge amount of magic and studied a huge amount of magic, and, I mean, there's a Star Swirl the Bearded section of thing. Yeah, he taught the princesses, Celestia and Luna, he taught them. They were young when he and the Pillars were doing their stuff. They are it is hard to underestimate the impact this one person has had. That's also going to be important for part 2, please remember it. So, of course, Twilight is geeking out about this. You ever wonder, hi Dream Whisperer, or should I say Blank, have you ever wondered, yeah, exactly, Lord Harriman, I caught that too. Have you ever wondered how, I'm saying that wrong, I lost my sentence. There is a huge amount of magic that we know that Twilight has learned because of his studies. We know that she has specifically learned magic from his textbooks or from his spells that still endure all these millennia later. We know that he has formed the basis of a lot of the magical math of how this operates. And yeah, Starlight too. I mean, most mages probably have. Obviously, Sunburst has as well. It's pretty common. And Twilight is a magic geek, and this is the magic guy. And all of this is just a way of explaining why it makes so much sense that Twilight would be absolutely jazzing about this. Because of course she would. What's interesting is, in my opinion, it also makes perfect sense that Starlight wouldn't be. Now you're probably thinking, well, but Starlight is a huge magic geek. She loves magic, and she has learned plenty of stuff about Star Swirl, and has had pretty much the same path. Yeah, but there's two big differences there. Difference number one is Starlight is a sorcerer, and Twilight is a wizard, as we've discussed many times. Starlight isn't really a learned spellcaster. She isn't that type of a geek. I actually thought of a comparison point after last week, and I wish I'd thought of it on camera, but I'm going to share it right now. Twilight is someone who plays football because she's I'm saying this wrong. Sorry, I screwed it up. Starlight is someone who plays football because she's a football geek. Twilight is someone who watches football and tracks the stats and pays attention to all the stuff because she's a football geek. Right? Like, I think that's a good analogy to describe the distinction between the two. Because I'm a football geek, for example, but I don't play football. I'm the Twilight of that equation. But there are some things that I absolutely prefer to do. Like speed running, I'm more of a Starlight. I prefer to actually speed run, not just to watch it and know the stats and know the figures and yada yada yada, right? So that's the distinction. And Starlight is capable of watching from the sidelines, and Twilight is capable of playing. But you can see how the focus is different. Sunburst is probably more distinctly the one who is just in the, back there. Okay, do this and this. Yeah, Sunburst would be a good coach. I like that. Yeah, economy, I'm a Twilight, because I don't have the bajillions of dollars to actually get out there and do that. Good example. So that's the first reason why Starlight isn't jazzing about that, because she's not the same type of geek. But the second reason I like more, and they even flat out call this out in the episode, the second reason is Starlight has experimented with Star Swirl spells, and it went badly. Twilight has experimented with Star Swirl spells, and it worked out. And you'll notice Starlight, first of all, directly brings that up twice in the course of the episode. And so obviously she would look at this and be substantially more... Now, I'll bring that up more later, but I just wanted to mention that in my mind it makes perfect sense. There are two reactions to this. So... oh, absolutely, Triaxia. Especially given how untrusting he was. So then we talk about the Pony of Shadows. Yeah, by the way, we're just drowning in continuity at this point. But I'll get back to the geeking in a second, because it's going to come up again just for this episode. We see the Pony of Shadows, and once again, the animation is so cool. They actually do an even better animation later, but what they do is they get across the visual impression of liquid smoke. Something that is obviously there and has a presence, but is just kind of morphing. Another thing I've heard described as is oil. It's just like moving oil, right? Or venom. Yeah, I caught the venom parallel when it reaches out and grabs each of the pillars. Yeah. Wonderful animation. Plug, plug, plug. It's just so good. I love it. Anyway, so apparently even way back in the day, they still used artifacts to contain powerful beings. Huh. So then we have a segue. It'll be years of study before we understand this. Open door. I think I understand it. They did Imperial Star Destroyer, although I think the animation is noticeably better, and in fact, that's a good point. If you ever need to see how much better the animation has gotten over the years, directly watch the Crystal Empire episode with King Sombra and the Pony of Shadows in this episode, because you can tell how much better they've gotten at the same general concept. So Twilight, I'm pulling an Ember here. Twilight figures it out. That makes sense. Twilight has studied Star Swirl for years and is specifically versed in his style and his approach. One of the things I talk about a lot when it comes to analyzing is people's fingerprints. Different creators leave different fingerprints. And even if they're not in the credits, or even if they're credited for something else, you kind of feel a certain creator's influence on a work, right? Like a director or a writer or a composer, for example. you can sort of feel their fingerprint. And I feel that Twilight is the kind of person who absolutely gets the fingerprint of Star Swirl and could just be like, okay, this, and this works like this, because she studied it so much, and she's a geek, and she's a bit of an analyst in general. So, she naturally made dioramas. It's okay, she made more dioramas. She's got a couple more. She's also made another model to help further explain this. Yeah, you can always tell a Tarantino movie. That is a good way to put that. Even if he's not... Even movies that Tarantino wasn't sufficiently credited on or didn't direct, you can feel his influence in it. And I'm trying to think of the name of it. There's another military submarine movie that's not The Hunt for Red October that I can't think of the name of. It stars Denzel Washington. Help me out here. Does anybody... I'll just Google it. Submarine movie. What do we got here? Crimson Tide. Crimson Tide. You can feel Tarantino's vibes in that. Because I forget what he did. I think he got brought in for uncredited rewrites or something like that. But you can actually feel Quentin Tarantino's influence on the script. It's there. It's visible. It's obvious because of the fingerprinting thing. It's fine, Trihexe. We don't need to think about it because they are fangirling. That is the answer. They're completely fangirling over this. But, well, hang on. Let's pull back just a second. I want to get into that in a minute. The map is from the elements and the tree. The tree is from the seed. The seed is from the pillars. I'm establishing this chain to help explain why it makes perfect sense that the map, and we've already discussed how the map operates many times, would be so intimately connected to the pattern of harmony that it would immediately be able to be like, oh yeah, the pillars, they're right here and here and here and here. Here's where the artifacts are. And just, there you go have them. Go get them. This is when I bring up the season thing. Right about the point in which they were setting up this stuff, Hasbro demanded that MLP be cut off after 9 seasons. Now, if you don't understand the significance of that, the plan was for MLP to go past 9 seasons originally. And there was going to be an entire season-long arc similar to the map, the chest of harmony, about these people going and having an entire episode devoted towards restoring the pillars and getting their artifacts. You can kind of tell if you pay attention, because what you see is basically each person gets like a minute, or in some cases just a few seconds, of what clearly could be an entire episode's Aesop smashed as quickly as it can. So they smashed the entire seasonal, what was intended to be an entire season subplot, into just a few minutes as they race through getting the artifacts back. And we got them. What's funny is I do think it works. I do think it's worse. I do think if they had stretched this out and done an arc, I think that would have worked better. But I think it works as is. I just don't think it works as well. You know, and Some Jim Reborn gives the perfect explanation. This is like the Year of Hell. And for those of you not familiar with Voyager, Ross, cover your ears for a second. Maybe I shouldn't even discuss this because I know you're not there yet. There was supposed to be a season of Voyager called the Year of Hell. There isn't. Instead, there's a 2-parter, which is called the Year of Hell. You get it. They smashed all the ideas and all the concepts across that into just this tiny little fit. Same general idea. Personally, I would say that Discord came after, because the elements came from the tree, and the tree wasn't around until the pillars, so Discord would have to be after by logical discourse. Okay, we're done. So we rush through these, and we just absolutely, I agree, Stabby Keith. We absolutely race through these. So we've got AJ does a feat of strength. Damn it, Trathan. AJ does a feat of strength. Sure, I still think it's preposterous. He magically turns into a giant dude, but whatever. We cut to Rarity immediately. Cool. It's just exposition dumped. Yards do need care. The same yard will look completely different depending on care. And I can tell you that from personal experience over the last year. So I'm with that. Then we see Gorge surfing. I'm going to segue for just a second as we rapid fire our way through these. There's a tiny little bit of dialogue in this episode. And I'm going to give this one bit of dialogue and one other thing a continuity plus. So we're up to 2 that I'm actually giving. Because this is the little flavor continuity that I love so much. And it doesn't have to be there, but it adds so much to a fictional work. Spike immediately recognizes gorge racing. You get on a surfboard, and you race down a volcano. Now, it's already been, or a lava flow, excuse me. It's already been established that lava doesn't do much to dragons. Cool. But they've never established this thing, and yet Spike not only recognizes it, but enjoys the activity. The reason that's a continuity plus is because that is showing that he and Ember have stayed in contact. Because that is how he knows about that, and that is how he is familiar with this activity, because he has kept being connected with the character off camera. As I've said many times, continuity doesn't have to be on camera. It can be off camera, as long as you acknowledge it or show that it was present, and I think this is a good example of doing that. And yeah, the other one was the archaeology filly, who I looked up her name. I wrote it down. Where is it? I swear I wrote down her name. Petunia Paleo. There it is. I wrote it down. It was a CMC episode. She's got a skull and bones. Cutie mark, what do we do? Right. That was a nice touch, too. That was good. So those are the two continuity counters. I'm just going to add those really quick. We might not add any more, to be completely honest, because this is just so much continuity that that's why we added the arc counter, was to deal with episodes like this one. So, hang on. Dioramas, map, here we go. Gorge surfing. So naturally, Garble's an idiot. Yeah, Spike and Dash was actually a really good combo. Spike gets along weirdly well with most of the ponies when he has a chance to. Go figure. Maybe we should have more Spike stuff that's actually good in this show. Anyways. I also had the random thought that Rainbow would probably hate dragons and love dragons pretty much at the same time. Because they do all sorts of awesome stuff that she'd like, but they're selfish gits which she would hate. Food for thought. Also, I will admit the friend explaining the joke to Garble got a laugh out of me. Then we... Oh, absolutely, Osiros. I guarantee you Dash would go up to Ember and be like, Ember! Yeah, Garble's also an idiot. So then we cut to Cattail, who's cool. And there's even like a mini... You can tell the bones of what was supposed to be an entire episode. Oh my gosh, the animals can't get to the water. And it's solved. Just like that. But what I like most about the Fluttershy one is Cattail bothers to say, you know, I would have just given you it. You didn't have to help me. Maybe I'm a weirdo. This is especially true in video games. But I always like it when you don't actually have to do the quest to get what you need. You're doing it because you want to help, or because one of your party members cares, or whatever, right? Like when it's not a requirement to get the item, you're doing it because of some other reason, right? I've always liked that kind of thing. So I like that Fluttershy just helps out there. Then we cut to Pinky, of all people, although there's a connection there, to who's going through the green slime. Why is there green slime? That's just... and whatever. She is obviously... I found this little thing. Why is there green slime? Why is it glowing? Is it... whatever. Is she gonna turn into like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle now? Is that where we're at? Because Pinky would totally rock that. Anyways. So then we skip forward a little bit. This is when we really get into the geek thing. I have talked a lot in my life and in my career on this show about the positive aspects of being a geek. You know, gushing and enthusiasm and shared enthusiasm, right? I mean, it's awesome. But one of the dangers about geeking out is you get a little bit too much into it. Now, we've actually described this a little bit before with the difference between mega fans and hyper fans, but that's not what I'm talking about. I mean when you get so into it that you tunnel vision. You put the blinders on, and you just start thinking, this is going to be awesome because... This is actually a semi-common story when it comes to fiction. Tunnel visioning and oh gosh, and then, oh, it's crap, is a fairly common story type. But it's still very understandable, and the reason people keep doing it is because people absolutely keep doing this in real life. Once again, this show continues to be very human, ironically. I didn't intend that joke, Ross, but I'm going to pretend I did. Yes, like horses wear, right? That's the thing. So both Sunburst, who is the coach, and Twilight, who's in the stands, are absolutely massively geeking out about this. And Starlight isn't, for the reasons I've already explained. There's also a line of dialogue which I wrote down. There's nothing wrong when you say it like that, unless the most legendary ponies of all time knew what they were doing and we shouldn't mess with it. What I find doubly interesting about this is it is a very common trope in fiction that the older generation, which is usually 1,000 years ago, couldn't deal with the problem. You know, natural disaster, ancient eldritch being, evil dude, evil lady, whatever, right? Like, that's a very, very, very common trope. So what they did is they couldn't deal with it, so they seal it away until now. And now you can deal with it because now we've had time and effort and work and study, and we have developed to the point where we can deal with it. This is the plot of quite a few different RPGs, for example. Not everyone. You know, it's probably like 20%, but it's a very common plot for a good reason, because it makes sense. There's a direct logic to that. We can't deal with this, but we might be able to in the future. So we seal it away. And we hope that when the future comes, we can deal with it. Like, there's a logic to that. There's a direct connection to that. And that is pretty much what's happening here. The catch is usually when that's done, the modern people are aware of this and aware of the thing that they're unsealing. In some cases, in some video games, for example, we deliberately unseal the ancient evil so that we can defeat it, so that we can remove it from the board. Not so much here. Here, the problem is, yeah, in the neutral zone. Here, the problem is, that's actually a good example of that exact trope. I didn't even think about that. So I'm going to steal that from Ross. I just had this great idea for a trope, for a comparison to that trope. In Star Trek The Next Generation, the last episode of Season 1 is the neutral zone. And in that episode, several people who were either wealthy or connected or were signing up for a program because they could, all signed up to be cryogenically stasised? Put in cryogenic stasis because they had some kind of fatal, debilitating medical issue that they didn't have the tech to deal with at the time. And the hope was that when they were unthawed, the technology would have advanced enough that they could deal with it. So that's yet another example of this kind of trope. Staceyed. They were turned into Stacy. No! Oh. Yeah, the negatives are there's plenty of examples of this trope. But what I love about this particular example of this trope is they didn't know they were unsealing the Pony of Shadows. They should have. They should have, if we're being completely honest. It should have been logical to say that, these people sealed themselves away to seal the thing away, so we remove them and we remove the seal. But blinders. And of course, Starlight doesn't bring that up. I'm willing to forgive that. What should have happened, if I was to nitpick this, if I was to polish this a bit, what I would have is I would have Starlight bring up that exact point. What if we bring back the Pony of Shadows as well? What if this is what the seal was? Well, we're here with them now. Magic has developed a lot. We can deal with that. And just basically have them brush it off as a non-concern because they're so excited about, yeah, don't worry, we got this. And that, I think that would have polished it over a little bit. Either way, they unseal it. The Pony of Shadow, yeah, again, Discord. They unseal it, and he comes back. And we have Star Swirl. Now, Star Swirl is voiced by Christopher Britton, who you probably know from absolutely nothing. He's only been in a handful of roles ever, but he really nails this role. But I was looking at his cast list. How many of you watched the old X-Men cartoon from the 90s? Star Swirl voiced Mr. Sinister back in that cartoon. Same actor. Because it was just clicking with me. I know that voice. I've heard that voice. And so I'm just perusing his list like, no. And then I see, the X-Men cartoon. It's, aha! I actually became a fan of Mr. Sinister because of that cartoon. Because Mr. Sinister kind of sucks in the comics, if we're being honest. No, Essex. Anyways. And then they never used him in the movies, even though they hinted at him constantly. So yeah, great voice actor, perfect fit. And the episode ends on a wonderful animation of the Pony of Shadows just kind of unfurling from a smoky cloud of death. And then terrifying music, My Little Pony, the end. Love that. So we need to rate this episode as per usual. Now, this is going to sound strange, but I don't think this episode deserves purple because it doesn't have that extra oomph. The next episode... But this episode does have wonderful animation, a cavalcade of continuity, good acting, good presentation, good visual storytelling. It does race. It does absolutely race through it because it's an entire season smashed into one episode. But yeah, I think I would say orange is the floor here for this episode, and I don't think it would be purple. So I'm thinking orange or red. Yeah, there's also some good character moments, some good dynamic. It's good stuff. It is definitely above average. I'm seeing some arguments for green. No, I'm kidding. There we go. This episode, consequently, was written by Josh Haber and someone who's never done anything before. And that would be Nicole Dubuc, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong. Yeah, I know, Rarity's... I could actually picture Rarity's episode better than the rest of them. I could picture an entire episode about Rarity showing up, and there's this place, and it's all run down, and she's trying to figure out what to go on, and the other ponies are all upset about this, and they talk about the past of the thing, and it's like, well, maybe we should do this. But there's this one flower, that's the one flower that matters. And maybe have, like, another subplot throughout the episode that kind of is the same theme, focusing on one thing to the exclusion of all else. Maybe Rarity, or whoever she's there with, is focusing on one thing to the exclusion of everything else. And then she realizes, oh my gosh, of course, I missed the forest for the trees, right? Like, you could just picture the episode there. The skeleton is present, even in the 30 seconds that scene is. Yeah, Haber the Red King. My God. This man is... Most of the writers that do long-term stuff have a bunch of... Like, Larson and Haber are the two that are consistently good. Everyone else bounces around. You know, Amy Keating-Rogers has greens and a purple. Cindy Morrow has green and purple. Dave Polsky has blue and purple. Megan McCarthy has blue and purple. Everyone bounces around, but Haber's just like red and a green. Red. Just red. It is amusing to me. I have to say, I think I'm going to go with red. I think the continuity cavalcade pushes it into red territory for me. I've said it before and I've said it again. The whole reason I am so pro-continuity is specifically because it enhances the work for me. It is the extra flavoring that makes it more enjoyable to me. Yeah, and I was going to say, there's one last thing we need to decide. So we gave the two definitive continuity counters, and we gave the arc counter. How do we do the rest of them? I mean, we could actually sit and try to figure it out. That would make sense, John. We could just sit down and be like, okay, so there's this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Remember, I pointed out, what was it, 5 in the first scene? Just garble. The fact that Spike is connected to them, the fact that the shield is fire resistant. You remember that? So that's why that shield can be used as a lava surfboard. Like this, it's so many things I didn't even mention because it's just nonstop. So Starswirl bringing up Starslight bringing up Starswirl's spell. Starlight bringing up Twilight using Starswirl's spell. The old ponish and the fact that who's into it and who isn't. So I think we're just going to give 30 continuity counters. We're just gonna drop it on the episode's face and say, there. That is completely rounded and estimated and totally inaccurate, and honestly probably lowballing it. But I think the lowballing it is covered by the arc counter, which again is supposed to count for much more. Like, the whole point of an arc counter is continuity counter plus, you know what I mean? So, I think we'll live with that. Because good God. Okay. Now I'm going to jump off the local recording,